All right, everybody, when we last left the Civil War, the great tragedy at Fredericksburg had just taken place. As the winter of 1862 continues, Union and Confederate soldiers around the Rappahannock River near Fredericksburg will trade Union coffee and sugar for Southern tobacco and cornbread, as an uneasy truce was created. Abraham Lincoln will have to fire the bumbling but well-intentioned Ambrose Burnside. He replaces him with a guy named Fighting Joe Hooker, who was Ambrose Burnside's most loudest and ardent critic after the debacle at Fredericksburg. And when Hooker comes back, he does a couple really good things. Number one, he's got this reputation of being a hard fighter, but a lot of his fellow officers don't like him. They believe there's always an ulterior motive to what he is doing. But what he does for the Army of the Potomac isn't bad. He gets rid of their slovenliness. He makes them march. He makes them drill. He makes them, police and keep their camp orderly. Don't sit around and get lazy. Do something. He also comes up with the idea of putting a patch or a badge on each unit to give them recognition, something to have pride, to sponsor a little bit of competition. And Joe Hooker's original plan is to leave John Sedgwick here in Frederick to fake an attack on Marye's Heights, while he leads the rest of the army up and around the Rappahannock to cross near Chancellorsville and attack Lee from behind. To attack Lee from both places. General James Longstreet had gone down to the Carolinas to gain some supplies, and Hooker said, "May God have mercy on Bobby Lee, for I will have none." And in the late spring, with muddy roads marching on, the massive Union Army, 70,000 soldiers strong, marches 9 miles up the road to Fredericksburg. Robert E. Lee had the uncanny knack of being able to put himself into the head of his commander, his opponent. And he sends Thomas Jackson towards Chancellorsville to keep an eye on the Union, to see what they were doing. And Lee was going to kind of split the difference in the middle, being able to give aid to either Jackson or Early, depending upon who needed it. Well, as the Union troops cross over the ford, the U.S. ford in Chancellorsville, two Union generals, General Hancock and General Sykes, quickly make contact. They're going through field in some brush, and they attack Stonewall Jackson's troops. They have the advantage, and they're pressing the great Stonewall Jackson, but hearing that Robert E. Lee wasn't sitting back at Marye's Heights, that he had come this way, unnerves Joe Hooker, who wanted to attack and be aggressive. And all of a sudden, just as he's winning, he orders his men to retreat and pull back to stop, driving Winfield Hancock, General Couch, General Sykes completely crazy. What are we doing? And Hooker says, "It's okay, I've got Bobby Lee right where I want him." It drives everyone else insane. So you've got handsome Fighting Joe Hooker, Winfield, Hancock, Oliver Howard, and George Meade, who are all going to take part in the battle in the upcoming days. And they're going to go against the great Robert E. Lee and his trusted aide, Thomas Stonewall Jackson. In the night of May the 1st, 1863, Robert E. Lee and Thomas Jackson sit here as what is called the famous Cracker Barrel Conference, where Lee will draw a plan in the dirt with his knife and then scrape it away so no one else knows what's going to happen. He is afraid of another Antietam. And it calls for Thomas Jackson and his men to march 12 miles and come through a thick patch of brush called the Wilderness. It was this densely thick area full of glacier cuts and bogs and swamps and ravines that nobody went through. Well, Jackson was able to find a local from the Welshford family to lead his army through it. Lee was going to split his army, dangerously thin. He and 12,000 guys were going to keep the Union Army on their toes while Jackson swept around from the side and crushed them. If Joe Hooker at any point figures out how understrength Lee is, he could crush him. Everything is dependent upon Jackson's men making this march. They make it, but it takes them a lot longer to get there. Oliver Howard and Winfield Hancock had men climb the trees in the wilderness, and they all see Stonewall Jackson's move. Hooker interprets it as a retreat. While they're supposed to be there in the morning, Jackson's men aren't ready until nearly 3 o'clock in the afternoon. They were worried about daylight, and he says, "Men, when you attack, give it everything you have. Don't stop until we shove them into the river." Well, for the Union, many of the guys were sitting, drinking, playing cards, doing their laundry, when all of a sudden rabbits and raccoons and deer come flying out of the wilderness, and all of a sudden an ear-piercing rebel yell is heard, and the Union Army gets devastated by a vicious attack by Thomas Jackson's divisions. Men go headlong, screaming and running for the rear, or running right into Robert E. Lee, and Joe Hooker has no idea what is going on. Winfield Hancock has his men ready. They dig quick gun pits. They begin to rush into line. They grab guys running. They turn them around, and they form kind of a horseshoe, and they are able to stymie Jackson's advance. One of the guys who was told not to stop was General A.P. Hill. And because it was getting dark and guys were disjointed, much to Jackson's dismay, A.P. Hill didn't rush his men into battle when night falls. Jackson is angry and frustrated, so he goes out to scout a way to get around behind Joe Hooker's army, where unfortunately he is shot 3 times by his own men. Once in the right hand, 2 in the left arm. He is taken to a house where his left arm will be amputated. On May the 2nd, Lee says, well, Jackson may have lost his left arm, I may have lost my right hand. On May the 3rd, Cavalry General Jeb Stuart leads the Stonewall Brigade against the Union Army. Again, gains were made, but now Oliver Howard, George Meade, Winfield Hancock, John Reynolds are ready. They absorb the Confederate attack. They are beginning to push it back when Joe Hooker is hit in the head by a fence post from an exploding cannonball, and he is knocked out. When he wakes up, he says, "Man, I just lost all confidence in Joe Hooker." He orders the overwhelmingly strong Union Army to retreat once again. He said he was going to find Bobby Lee. May God have mercy on him, for I will have none. But Joe Hooker whips out and retreats. Lee has once again won the day. Chancellorsville is his greatest and most strategic victory, but it comes at a high cost. After recovering from the amputation and doing well, Thomas Jackson catches pneumonia and he will die. His last words were, press on, boys, press on, keep going, tell A.P. Hill to keep attacking. I'm going to cross over that river and rest in the shade of trees for a spell. Many people believe, due to Jackson's religious conviction, that he was seeing heaven. And at the end of the Battle of Chancellorsville, Robert E. Lee wins again and Abraham Lincoln fires Joe Hooker. I'll see you guys next week.